This is the devotion for January 5th, and today we're going to be looking at the 5th chapter of Isaiah. Before we look at it, remember today to be in prayer for Ronnie Carpenter. So, at the very beginning of this chapter, Isaiah begins to use this image of a vineyard, sort of like a parable that he's telling, and it really stood out to me. He says, "Let me sing for my beloved concerning his vineyard." And we get the image here that he's talking about God and his vineyard, which is referring to his chosen people, to Judah in this instance. It's about God and his relationship with his people. And it starts out talking about all the things that the beloved has done for his vineyard. And you get the idea. He really loves this vineyard and he wants this vineyard to succeed. I mean, he does everything he can to show his love and his desires for good for this vineyard. I mean, he takes it, he puts it in a fertile place up on a hill in a good place, and he gets all the rocks out of the way, and he clears the land. He makes it what it's supposed to be. He puts a hedge around it, even puts up watchtowers to make sure it's protected. What else does he do? He has a purpose for it. It says he hewed out a wine vat in the vineyard. So, I mean, he is expecting this vineyard to produce sweet, cultivated grapes. That's what he wants of it. That's why he's doing all this. He expects something from it. Of course, he ends up being disappointed. Even though he's put all this work into it, still the vineyard ends up producing wild grapes, common grapes. It's not what he wanted, okay? Well, this is a picture of God and his chosen people. I mean, he chose them. He planted them where he wanted them to be. He gave them everything he could. He taught them about himself. He gave them his law. He separated them from the other nations and gave them circumcision. He set them apart. And what did he expect? He expected them to be a people who loved him, who lived in righteousness, doing what they knew pleased him. And he expected them to be a light to all the other nations. Unfortunately, he ended up being disappointed. They ended up being common, just like all the other nations. They produced wild grapes. They lived in sin, and they lived just like they didn't know God, like he hadn't done any of this stuff for them. And I think when I read through that, it's just a reminder to me, and it should have been a red flag for the people of Judah of their need for salvation. They had everything. They knew God. They knew his law. They knew what pleased him. They knew the consequences of living in a way that didn't please God. They knew the consequences of unrighteousness. And yet it wasn't enough to overcome their sin problem, the problem of their flesh. So this is what I want to encourage you with today. Don't trust in yourself. Don't trust in your own goodness and your own righteousness. You know what? We are still the vineyard of God. He's made us his chosen people through Jesus Christ. He has chosen us to bear fruit. But it's not through our righteousness or our goodness. He showed us here that that doesn't work, even with his chosen people, Israel. What works is salvation through Jesus Christ. And when we submit to him and let his life and his will grow through us, he produces fruit in us. So I just want to encourage you today, don't rest in your own righteousness. That will not last for you. It won't go well. But rest in the righteousness of Christ and just seek to draw closer and closer to him and let him be your righteousness and let him produce fruit in your life. Submit and yield to Jesus. Love you guys. Thank you for listening, and God